Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. I have conversations with people that help us make better meaning of our lives. In this episode, getting clear on what is truly at risk in pursuing what we want. I don't think we like to hear it, but there just seems to be continual evidence that our culture is growing more risk averse, less willing to try new things, and as a result, becoming stagnant. Another data point this is on our reported near all-time lows of subjective well-being. So I brought on an expert, as I often do, to discuss the issue. Ben Swire. He's an innovative thought leader on human connection and authentic living. Ben is an award-winning designer, writer, and former design lead at the iconic innovation firm IDEO. And he co-founded Make Believe Works, where they help people build deeper relationships and discover their authentic purpose through creative activities. Well, Ben has spent a lot of his time working creatively with people and big teams, helping them progress toward the things they really want. Ben says we all want inspiring experiences, meaningful work, and deep relationships, but those generally require risking vulnerability, inviting disappointment, and trusting others. So thus we hesitate, we settle just to remain safe, and we stay stuck. So he works to lessen the perceptions of risk. And that's why I had him on the show. Ben's got a new book called Safe Danger, an unexpected method for sparking connection, finding purpose, and inspiring innovation. As you'll hear, I really honed in on looking at what is really most at risk. And so often it's just our identity. I say just, it's one of the biggest fears we have, our anxieties that we have. But to get clear, our identity. So we have anxiety about what people might think, or heck, what we might think about ourselves sometimes. And I'm not going to cheerlead that this is about everyone just quit caring what other people think, but definitely working to shine the light on the issue and help us see how often fairly unfounded the concern is in regards to what we stand to gain. So coming up next is my conversation with Ben Swire and getting clear on what's really at risk between what we want and what keeps us stuck. Ben, the title of your book caught my attention right away. Safe Danger, obviously two things that we don't often put together, and wanted to kick off. Now, of course, I've gone through the book, but for everybody listening, go ahead and give your definition of what you mean by pairing those two together.
Yeah. They are a sort of counterintuitive pairing. And most people do think of safety and danger as sort of opposites. But I've come to find them really more useful to think of them like dance partners. So safety sort of gives us solid footing, but danger gives us the momentum, the movement. If we only chase safety, we end up stagnating. If we only chase danger, we burn out. So safe danger for me is the emotional sweet spot between the two. So where you can sort of foster an emotional environment where people feel secure enough to leave security behind, but still stretched enough to grow. And that's where I've seen connection and creativity and belonging really just exponentially thrive. So my work is basically about helping people practice the kind of honesty and connection they wish they already had. And safe danger is this interesting emotional space that lets them do just that.
Okay, you have a lot of reference in your book from a corporate scenario, which I have absolutely zero of. I'm just a people of the people aspect. So I'll focus primarily there. But regardless, you've also do just regular life as well. But in both instances, you've been, I'm going to say, in the game for a while and working with people intimately and day in and day out. How have you seen the progression, evolution, devolution, however you look at it, of, I'll just say, humanity, as you have been involved with them, deal with danger? And I'm saying that, and I'm fishing a little bit, because I look and feel like we have become more danger averse than we used to. We just had Michael Easter on the show recently with the comfort crisis, and him looking at our propensity to pursue comfort, security, safety, whatnot. and feels like we've inadvertently so wrapped ourselves around that we're missing out. And I'm getting that flavor from you.
Yeah. I mean, that's a key thing that I do talk about in my workshops and in the book, that businesses, families, friends, all these people with the best of intentions are confusing safety with comfort. And from my point of view, and I think Brene Brown put this really nicely, but, comfort is about making it easy for everyone to fit in. But real safety is when people can stand out and still belong. So it's not about removing friction. It's about creating enough trust that friction is productive, that it lights up possibilities that would have been missed. So when I go into the corporate world and corporate life, I mean, this switch to comfort itself is an interesting shift. The early part of my career I spent at Morgan Stanley in the financial world, and making people comfortable was not a priority then. And it was much more sort of cutthroat, and everybody sort of knew that. But this switch to comfort, I think, is pushing people, again, with the best of intentions in a really dangerous area as well. I worked with a company that had gorgeous offices, free meals, meditation pods, all this stuff that on the surface looked like the perfect place to work. But they came to us after a product launch had failed pretty dramatically. And then they had learned that several of their team on the product launch had seen the flaws weeks earlier, but stayed silent. And when we talked to them, they said, look, disagreeing is not how you get promoted around here. And the company had built comfort, but not safety. And so the cost was, ideas and innovation and insight that never made it to daylight. But I think, the same thing happens in families and in relationships. How many therapists have sat through a client saying, no, I could never tell them how I really feel. But, I think comfort, as I said, comfort isn't safety. It's stagnation with good manners.
Well, I appreciate in the book you talk about that you don't separate personal and professional much. We bring both of those lives in. So, we're talking about it. Now, the professional life may be sometimes under a microscope more, but again, when you look at safety, so me as an individual, and you are guiding me in regards to safety and danger in this dance. My interest around risk these days is looking and questioning what is at risk. Here I am as an individual, and I like this list that you gave that we generally want: inspiring experiences, meaningful work, deep relationships. This is our wish list. Those required, though, risking vulnerability, inviting disappointment, trusting others, even failure sometime, causing us to hesitate, settle to feel safe, and become stuck. And where I find myself just given a lot of interest these days, Ben, is looking at any instance where there's perceived threat, which I would say is at the core of this cultural anxiety that we have. What is generally a threat? And I'm seldom finding that we're at threat of, oh my gosh, I'm going to get attacked by a bear, or I'm going to go broke and go homeless. It's usually a feeling of identity, which you speak to as well. Yeah. So give me your thoughts on that. What is generally, when you're working with people, whether it's in the general populace or in the workplace, what is generally at risk that they're holding back for?
I mean, I think people are terrified of judgment. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I think to a great degree, frankly, I think most of us are living someone else's life. We're following the expectations that we inherited instead of choices we've made ourselves. And we learn early on to hide or diminish the qualities that make us unique so that we can fit in and we can get jobs and we can feel loved. Anybody that's been through middle school has had that experience of conformity, sort of crushing them into a prefab place. And I think what stops us from stepping out of those shells is the fear that if we don't live up to that conformity, there's no place for us. I know from my own experience, the emotional armor that I put on in the early years to protect myself from pain, from humiliation, from embarrassment, all that stuff did its job really well. And unfortunately, it did its job really well, which meant that all that stuff stayed protected and safe and small. You can't grow outside of the armor that you wear. It locks you in. And so for me, part of what happened with my own journey was I went to a place, I started working at this design studio called IDEO. And it was the first time that I felt all of the various pieces of me being welcomed in and valued. And I realized that that was what was possible, and sort of took it apart to see what was actually at work. And that's where I ended up with this safe danger concept, because I feel like it can be, when it's used correctly, it's a tool for finding your way back to yourself, despite the fear, despite the anxiety over judgment that we've all been raised with and that we perpetuate by judging everybody else around us. But I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say things like they write or they sing or they draw, but they could never show it to anybody, or that they're in a job that feels hollow, but it's prestigious, so they don't want to leave it. I think what I've seen with safe danger and why I like it, why it was so useful to me, and why I use it so much, is that it allows people to risk showing up as their real selves in a really safe, limited environment, instead of someone else's version of themselves. It's a chance to sort of rekindle that dimmed light, and see if we can rediscover and express some of those parts of ourselves that we may have been scared into silence, essentially. And that I've just seen be such a loss at work, at home, in all those places, when people aren't speaking with who they, from their own unique voice, and they're not bringing all the insights that may not fit in. The work misses out, the job misses out, the family misses out, the people who mean the most to you, the people that look up to you, they're all missing out if you're not standing out for who you are. And the work that we do is a way of playfully and sort of creatively helping that to change a little bit.
Okay, let's go to take that, Ben, and say, obviously somebody's listening to this and they lead a group, whether they think they lead their family or they lead their, a primary influence or authority in their family or at work. They can read obviously this and decide, I'm going to make a place like this. Great. For everyone else who's not in that place, they're down here as the recipient, in essence, the employee, whatnot. I would assume, because I'm saying this because I've not been in that corporate environment. I'm a lifetime entrepreneur guy and whatnot. But to be in that place, that there's people feeling that they are doing things to guard, put armor on, as you say, and they right now believe if I don't, it won't work out. So it sounds great to be my authentic self and to, stand in my ownness. But if I do, I'm going to get fired. I'm going to get ridiculed. I'm going to get demoted. I'm not going to get promoted. Speak to that, because my interest is how often that really happens, or is it the opposite to a degree, or can it be often, as you said, no, now they get to see the real you. It will improve everything. Play with that.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard both, and I think the insight. It is scary. Vulnerability is a risk by its very nature. That's what makes it valuable. You're handing people ammunition that could be used against you, and you're trusting them not to use it. And if you're in an environment where you think this is really dangerous to be myself, I think the way to test those waters is by creating moments of small moments. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to leap off a cliff. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can just be small moments of curiosity, of authenticity, of honesty. And you see how that's received, and you begin to push, you take a step outside of your comfort zone little by little, and you test the waters. I think most of us that are in that dynamic assume that everybody's waiting to club us back into conformity. And more I see that when people take a risk, it's appreciated. People enjoy being surprised. They like being caught off guard. Often it lets people see that they themselves are not alone when they hear that you're going through something and struggling. And then what feels like you taking a risk is actually a gift to them, because it expands the horizons of what is possible for them. That's what I've seen that's surprised me the most in as I said, I do the work I do, takes me into corporate offices, but it also takes me into schools and families and stuff. And what's been really fascinating is that everybody is starved for connection. And many of them just don't even notice it. It's like, when you walk into a kitchen and you smell your grandmother's cooking, and suddenly you realize you're starving. Like, for a lot of these people, they take a step outside their comfort zone. They take a risk. Somebody sees them for who they are. And I can see their faces light up. They feel seen and recognized. And there's a hunger for that I think many of us have become, has numb, the world has numbed us to. The former Surgeon General, he had this whole thing about this loneliness epidemic, that people are isolated, that they're surrounded by people all the time, that they're on all this stuff, and yet nobody really knows them. They don't really know anybody else. They tell these stories, but nobody actually, and that's heartbreaking. I think he said, 50% of Americans identify or will acknowledge being lonely. That's the ones that will acknowledge it. How many others are just, no, I'm not lonely, but it's heartbreaking. And I feel like, you take these steps and you see if it's safe. If it's not, which, as you said, there's a lot of places. There are a lot of places where it is all profit's the bottom line, or it's my way or the highway, or if you are different than me as a parent, I reject you. It does then become a question of the sort of life that you want to lead. In the book, I interview Ryder Carroll, who's the guy that invented the bullet journal, and his approach to that came out of his own struggles with ADHD and his education and schooling, and he was deeply embarrassed that people thought he was stupid, that he was, all these things, and he'd come up with this system that was helping him get through. And when he first started sharing that, he shared the system without the background. He just said, here's my system of organization. And he became known as this organizational guru, and he was on all these things. And when I was talking to him, he said, at some point I started seeing people themselves saying how grateful they were for this, because they had been through exactly what I had been through, but I hadn't fessed up to it. They were fessing up to it. And that changed his whole perspective. And he started opening up, and he got vulnerable, and he shared. And he said that led him to some other insights where he just decided that it was more valuable to him to be himself and be surrounded by people that liked him than to be surrounded by people that liked the person he was pretending to be. Yeah. And I think that takes a certain amount of maturity, maybe. I think it takes a couple of years of pretending to be someone else and feeling how exhausting that is before you just decide, screw it, I'm just going to be me and let the chips fall where they may. I don't know. It's a very scary and really brave thing, I think, for people to do. But having spoken to people that have done it, I've never spoken to one that says they really regret it. Like, I wish I'd stayed wrapped in that image everyone expected me to be. Everyone I've spoken to has said it's opened up new avenues. It's seen new ways of living and being and contributing to the world. It has also cost them. It's cost them friends. It's cost them people that didn't like who they actually were. And they had to be okay with that. And it's not an easy thing to to live a life. These things come with trade-offs. And I think that the question is, who are you making pay the price of this? If the people around you aren't getting the full you, because you want to please a bunch of strangers or acquaintances or people on the subway, at the very least, that's worth acknowledging and making that choice intentionally and deliberately.
Well, I'm one of those people, Ben, and that the past years have seen me as a big wake-up call in my own persona. It was Superman. Dad, friend, worker was Superman. Yeah. I trained everybody that I fix everything. I show up for everything. There's no excuses. There's no limits. And I was feeding me. I was feeding my identity, what I had grasped onto as a kid, that performance is, I am my performance. I am my achievement. And I wish I could say I was so wise that I came to this conscious awakening on my own, but I didn't. I came after I burnt out, and then there was a collateral damage, which for me is divorce and, losing the family home and these things that I had strapped on as these are my identity. And in losing those, I had, a couple of choices. One was just to go down in flames, and the other was to consider and grow from there. Now, I'm not, like you said, I'm not going to justify there's collateral damage. Absolutely. Today, my children testify to me differently. They're grateful for all the stuff Dad did. Now they are able to experience who Dad bees. And I still disorient myself, Ben, that I am not, when I hear the need or the opportunity to do something, I still have that gut reaction. Go be Superman. I still, again, disorient myself with not and going, no, they haven't asked. Just be. And to see how often they didn't need me to do that. They may not have even wanted me to. And meanwhile, Dad's at peace. Dad's a safe place. Dad is available for them. But it came at I didn't, I wish I could have come to that from a mature standpoint without the collateral damage. I didn't.
I wonder how many people are able to without crisis, without pain, because it's a huge shift to give up who you've been in order to be somebody completely authentic and new. And I think it often requires, there's a big part of me that is bitter about I feel like the sitcoms of my childhood lied to me. Like Alice or Stephen and Elise Keaton, like Family Ties, they all had everything figured out by the time they were 35. And their lives were always, and I feel like I've been, year after year, I've just had to learn more and more. And I've grown more and more because of it. But it also hurts. More and more growth hurts. And learning hurts, I think, when it really takes charge, because it means letting go of something that you thought was right before as an adult. And that can be humiliating, it can be painful, it can be humbling, it can be all sorts of things that we don't want. But as I said, I found in just talking to people that have stepped through that thresholds that very rarely they've chosen, have also felt like I wouldn't go back. I wish I'd been spared these steps. But what I learned is worthwhile and valuable, and I want to be where I am right now. But it is rough, and it is a risk. And I think part of what I learned that I tried to put into this book is the small ways that we can practice taking those risks and seeing if they're worthwhile, and taking a little charge, taking control of where we direct our paths on our own in a sort of safe and playful way, to be the person that we really want to be in the world. I think that also shifts dramatically as we get older, and especially as we have kids. I think you put it really, really nicely, but I think that shift about as a parent, how you show up for your kids versus demonstrating to them what life can be by who you are. And I think there's that distinction of here's the image of me as opposed to here's a life you can live. I wouldn't want my kids to have felt the same obligations and things on my shoulders that I did early on with their childhood, that it took me some time to unlearn. I don't want them to have to go through that. So if I can show them who I am now, hopefully it spares them at least some of that when it's their turn.
Ben, I have the opportunity. I have adult kids, more than a few, and to be able to talk soberly and to some of your turn, vulnerably with them, I've gotten direct feedback, and I've literally gotten, in my face feedback of, Dad, thanks for all you did. I mean, they're not going to minimize that. Thank you. You second to none. You did everything. You did it all. But, and this is a little bit of my paraphrase, I've also gotten the feedback, because we have a big family. that we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. The cost to see what I did. They didn't see, I get credit for inspiring them. They're all foodies. They love that I inspired them. They're all music aficionados, which they give me credit for. They all pursue health and wellness for the most part. And they said, Dad, you inspired us. You inspired us to go after inspiration. But with some things, marriage and family and how we did that, I said, I don't want to do that. You were running like a madman always. And so to look at that and to go, that wasn't my example that I thought was so heroic, that was so my identity. The activity of that uninspired my kids. And so here I'm looking and go, what was the point? It was, I was feeding me. And of course I did it until I couldn't. And then I burnt out. So it's like a double negative. And to question that, I don't love your statement. Actually, I hate your statement, but I align with it that we are living someone else's life. And your statement, back to my question, my statement of what is often at that, we're pursuing safety because we don't want what? The first thing you said was judgment. Judgment. Play with this with me, because I feel like to an extent, I don't want to minimize or polarize or exaggerate, but Ben, I would like to be at a place where you can judge me, but I don't have to feel judged. Now, if I care about you and respect you, I may be interested into why, if it's a negative judgment, I ask, what are you seeing or what are you feeling? And I may care, but for me to feel judged, I have to, in essence, give you permission, or give myself permission to feel judged. Why would I do that? Give me your thoughts on that as you've seen it, especially, I'm going to say, in the workplace, where it probably is more acute than other aspects of life. In the workplace, the fear of being judged, what would happen if we gave somebody a pill that we could take that out of everybody?
Yeah. I mean, I have two thoughts on that. I mean, the first was that was one of the key things that changed my life, was going to a place where I didn't feel judged, where I felt like I could offer up a half-baked idea with the confidence that the people around me would take it and make it better, as opposed to belittling me or thinking that I was goofing off or something like that. And that, I think a good piece of that comes from being honest with yourself about your people, finding the people that you want to surround yourself with, the work that you want to do, or teaching people how to do that. And by modeling it, I think that's the second piece of it. That was a really interesting thing. There's a woman named Ingrid Fattel-Lee who wrote a book called Joyful that I talked to. And she said something that it really resonated with me, which was that to free yourself from this fear of judgment. And she was giving this example of just being able to dance, like go onto a dance floor and just have fun without worrying. But that the most powerful thing you could do wasn't necessarily about ignoring other people's judgment of you, but it was to stop judging other people yourself, because that was something you could control. And that every time you look at somebody else and you make a joke about them, every time you look at someone else and think, oh, I'm glad that's not me, all you're doing is asserting to yourself that there's a standard of behavior that is acceptable and that is not, and that those people have stepped out of that confines and I'm not going to be that person, which then you play back to yourself and you lock yourself into these dynamics because you're afraid of having that. You assume everybody around you is thinking the same thing you would think, which is now judging you. So one of the things she said was, and I really loved this and I've tried to put it into practice. It's tricky, but it is useful, is that the less you let yourself judge other people, instead you just look at them and you say, good for them. That's an interesting choice. I wonder why they made that sort of approach. Makes you a lot less susceptible, because you realize how unimportant it can be and how freeing it can be to do something that other people might judge. And I like that because, we're in the same years that we grow up when we're being sort of crushed with conformity. We're also told, oh, don't pay attention to other people. They're just jealous, all the anti-bullying thing, which is all well-intentioned and means nothing when someone's making fun of you and your feelings are hurt and you're isolated and all that. But I found that the not judging other people was something I could control, and I did see the impact of it. So I thought that was a really interesting insight that she had.
I like that. I remind myself of Ram Dass, who talks about that judgment. He says, we go into the forest, which is, I live in the woods, and we look around and there's a straight tree. There's a tree bent to the right. There's one to the left. There's one that's gnarled. There's one that doesn't have much foliage or whatever. And we just notice it. It's just the woods. And Kevin's paraphrasing, why can't we just go to the grocery store and see just different people?
Yeah.
I grew up judging. And in that scenario, it's just people in a grocery store. There's no reason to.
Yeah.
Now, I think, we do ascertain people in the workplace and how we can get along, whatnot, but that aspect of not judging other people. I keep coming back, and you talk to this in the book about to identity, how the efforts we take to protect ourselves. And in that sense, let's talk about judgment. Do you perceive that those of us who are judging others, I'm going to paraphrase, I'm going to play with what you said, that she's like you're who you spoke to not judge other, or to not feel judged, don't judge others. I perceive, Ben, that the worst judgment I experienced was my judgment of me. Tell me how you see that.
I think that's the cruelest thing. And, you said those of us that judge, we all judge. I think that's built into our culture. It's how we, as a society, keep the rules and the norms going.
Yeah.
But I think that indoctrination, where we are our most cruel critics, I run into people all the time that tell, other people to take a break. They need to take care of themselves, and they'll do this while working through lunch. It's just self-care for busy people inevitably sinks to the bottom of their to-do list, and kindness and grace that we extend to other people is almost impossible to extend to ourselves, especially for people that have come from either a home, a background, or a self-image where that success or that perfection is how they are valued, how they are judged. And I think, our world is designed to reinforce that. Most workplaces are really good at rewarding employees for what they do, if they do it well. They're not so good at celebrating people for who they are. And that's efficient if you're looking for a bottom line, but it's really brittle. I think if your value depends on flawless output, depends on being perfect, depends on getting everything right, then everybody's going to hide their messier truths, because we all have them. But those are the exact truths that people need to share to really connect and innovate and grow and be creative and understand each other. And that's heartbreaking, but it's also ubiquitous. I think we're all struggling with that. But I have seen that when you work to create an environment, either in your family or in your workplace, as a leader or as an employee, where people feel like they can belong and be themselves, they do very quickly start showing up in a very different way. They start sharing sooner. They're more comfortable asking questions, asking naive questions, risking ideas that might not be approved, because they trust that they won't be exiled for it and removed.
The aspect of, that old term of, if you're going to speak and you're nervous public speaker, just picture everyone in the audience naked. It's that old cliche, right?
Yes.
Well, I found myself thinking about that concept as I went through your book of, well, here's my frame of reference. I have a group of guys. I call them my adventure guys. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of admittedly pretty well-to-do guys in their 50s and 60s who out here in Colorado all have some capacity for an athletic pursuit. Here's an ultra marathoner, here's a rock climber, here's a, mountain biker, here's a rafter or kayak or whatnot, skiing like that. So we'll go out as groups and do one of those activities. So today we're going to ski, backcountry ski or whatever. And today we're going to do mountain biking on this epic trail. And we went surfing in Mexico together and yada, yada. And what interested me is they're not all, you do have literally, this guy, John's the billionaire, financially and head of the world. And this dude is, we got one guy and he's a stay-at-home dad. He's got 2 boys, stay-at-home dad. He takes care of them. His wife's a doctor. And so he does that. So if we look at the hierarchy there economically and from a power standpoint or whatever, it's lopsided. But we get out there on the trail and the stay-at-home dad is the rock star mountain bike guy. Nobody can keep up with him. And while the billionaire's, lagging, and you get the point. And I saw how it would go back and forth. And ultimately at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of dudes sitting around the campfire afterwards. And none of that stuff matters. And I thought about this in the workplace, that if we strip everyone down from the C-suite execs down to the janitor, and we look at every area of their life. I used to host the Ziegler show, the Ziegler Wheel of Life. And we look at finances and relationships and health and wellness and spirituality and strip everyone down naked and realize kind of that concept of they all put their pants on the same way. A lot of them have IBS issues that they're dealing with. A lot of them have relational fracture. And I wish we could do that because my curiosity is it would really level out the playing field. And you realize there's not really any relevant hierarchy here. It's why I like the dystopian movies that you see that happen and the world gets blown up. And at the end of the day, then it doesn't really matter where you were in the hierarchy of the culture. It's just, can you take care of yourself and build a fire and find some food? And it felt like that was a lot of your focal point with the exercises you did with people, was to level the playing field. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about, I think as you put it, we have our successes and we have our failures and we have those hierarchies that we surround ourselves in. But one of the most interesting pieces of feedback I get at the end of a workshop is often somebody will say something very sort of prosaic and almost like a Hallmark card. They'll say something like, it's so important for us to remember that we're all human beings. And that phrase is sort of by itself sort of trite. It's, it's bumper stickers and stuff. But what I love about that is that they've had an experience which has reinfused that truth with some meaning. And I think it is one of those truths that is extremely powerful when it does have meaning. We remember how much everybody here is trying really hard to be their best selves, whatever that might in their own head be, and how much they're struggling and how much they're striving and how much they carry with them on Monday mornings when they come into work or on Friday nights when they come home. And to have to carry all that by ourselves, I think just leads to, as you said, sort of a collapse eventually, or if not, a deep unhappiness or a dissatisfaction with a piece of our lives. And being able to open up and share some of those and connect with other people and know that it's okay, can make a big difference. I have a friend who's an FBI agent, and he does a lot of the stuff you're talking. He goes running through the Grand Canyon in 150-degree heat, and he does all these things. He's on the SWAT team, and has always been one of these guys that is just ready to go. He picks up the heaviest bag. That's who he is, and that was his persona. And he went through some stuff in the line of duty that really took that apart for him. And he found himself at huge emotional odds with what he was feeling and who he thought he was supposed to feel to be that person. And it eventually took him on an entire journey where he is now sort of going through the agency, advocating for better emotional health, for bringing these two things together. Not just be this, hero, but what it costs you as a person to be that hero and what you have to feed and support and nurture to keep doing the job that is so important to you. And it is not about ignoring all of the pain, doubt, all that stuff. It's about accepting it, facing it, dealing with it, sharing it, and not carrying it by yourself in isolation. And for him, he has just seen it has changed the way he does his job. It has changed the way he feels about his job. It changed the way he thinks about himself as an agent. And, these aren't guys that are typically known for having a warm and soft, cuddly underbelly. And that's part of his struggle. I did ask him at some point, I was like, if current you went back and talked to first year you, what could you have said that would have spared you what you've been through? And he said, I honestly don't think there's anything I could have said that would have gotten through to that person. Yeah. Because I knew so clearly who I was supposed to be and what was allowed. And I think that's the value that can come from trying to get to people younger, earlier in their careers and all that, and say, you don't have to carry this all on your own. You shouldn't carry this on your own. To be the best you, to be the best that you can do, it means not isolating yourself. It means helping other people to grow and all that stuff. I just hear again and again that there is such value in that, both for ourselves, but also for the people around us, that we allow them to share with us, and it lifts them up. There's at IDEO, one of their values was make others successful. It wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about doing your job the best. It was about making others successful. And that mentality went into everything. When you're surrounded by everyone else who wants to make you successful, you don't have to look over your shoulder. You don't have to worry about getting your fingerprints on anything. You can just do your best, be your best, and everybody is sort of rooting for you. And that experience, to be part of a culture like that, is life-changing.
That whole monologue right there is almost hard for me to go off of and dilute, but I'm not done talking yet. So I have to mark that one. Everybody come to the 40-minute mark in this. And your FBI guy, I'll ask you when we're done here. I want to talk to that guy. Ben, the tagline of your book starts off with an unexpected method for, first point is sparking connection. And I wanted to take the opportunity to talk to you about that. That is the experience of what I'm going to call, I wish I could come up with a more profound word than true or authentic connection. As I've deconstructed my own life, it's a primary focus is connection. And I lately I want to think that I coined it, but I have no idea. Somebody else did. I'm sure somebody's talked about it. But in the same concept, I do a lot of work in the functional medicine space. And a term there is we are, incredibly overfed and undernourished. Over here today, I continue coming to feeling we are so over communicating and over connecting with more people than, over communicating and over contact with more people than ever, but with less connection than ever, which comes to you talked about a little bit ago, loneliness. I had a Stanford professor on here a few weeks ago. He's been at Stanford for 40 years. And apparently there's some self-reporting from the students, and self-reported they are, in the 40 years he's been there, the most lonely demographic of students ever.
Yeah.
Most lonely. And yet I bet they're in communication and contact with more than ever. If we took a student 40 years ago, they'd say, yeah, I'm in contact and communication with like 10 people. I'm making it up for the exaggerated point. 10 people. Today that student's with, 1,000, but the connection is less than ever. Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, first, I'm assuming you're talking about the Designing Your Life author, which, I love his book.
He runs the, is it Bill Burnett?
Yeah, Bill Burnett. Yeah, Bill. He's part of
Design Your Life lab at Stanford, him and the other author, but I had Bill on the show. Yes.
He's stellar. And I think, I think people often say, well, we're in contact with people, but we're not connecting with them. And I don't think it's a but. I think that's why we are not. It is just, we are so full and used to now the superficial level of connection, communication. And one of the things that I hear a lot from teams and from people, they talk about, what COVID did to their workplace culture. We're not together anymore. We're remote, and it's really taken that apart, and we need to bring that back together. But as much as I'm in favor of bringing connection to, now this idea that there was a heyday of meaningful connection at work, I think is a fiction. I think the water cooler culture that we're missing, that was talking about what movie you saw over the weekend or the weather for this coming weekend is not meaningful connection. I think we just got used to this sort of superficial level and chit chatting. And I think it allows us a false sense of community. One of the most profound moments in the work that I've done actually happened after a really just awful tragedy. I was asked to lead a workshop for a financial firm whose staff had just lost a colleague in a workplace shooting. Somebody who was having big problems went in with an automatic rifle and killed a lot of people, including one of their colleagues. And I was brought in about 10 days after that. And I am not a therapist. I'm not a grief counselor. They had experts for that. But I was brought in because their team leader wanted them to connect as people together, not just as individuals. So when I arrived there for the activity, it was about 10 days later, and basically they'd gotten word from on high that it was time to get back to work. And they were having lunch together, and the room was chattery. People were laughing and smiling, and they were talking about this and that, the sandwiches and franchises, and it was lively. It was nice. But after I started the workshop, and the activities are designed to get people to open up and talk a little bit deeper, one of the guys started talking about the impact that this had had on him. And he opened up and he said, my father calls me every 2 days or something. I pick up maybe once a month because I'm busy and I got things to do and I'm on my career. And that's going to change now because I really realized what's important and my values and where I'm coming from. And that started a cascade. Another guy started talking about, his relationship with his parents, but little by little, they all started talking about what was going to change. And they had that opportunity to talk about that. They had been in a room alone by themselves before I even arrived. And that is not where the conversation had gone. The conversation had naturally gone to a place of comfort and superficiality, yet they were all feeling these same feelings and didn't realize that they were all having those together. So when the activities that I use, the safe danger stuff, I use creativity like oven mitts to create. It's a safe way to handle like emotionally dangerous material. And it allows people to hide behind the things that they make and then open up and talk about what they're really feeling. And once they do, it's amazing. And one of the guys said this thing that I just thought it was just true. He said, I've been waiting to feel close to people before I open up, but I'm starting to understand that I need to open up first to feel close. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly it. Trust and vulnerability, they're not a reward for connection. It's the cost of entry. It's the currency we spend to belong to the people we want to connect with. So that's where I'm coming from.
Gosh, you got me thinking on a couple levels, Ben, that I grew up going to and spent a lot of my adult life going to church. I don't in that same capacity now. And I have my own issues with religion and church, but that's where a lot of my closest friends came together. You go to Sunday school or the small group or whatever, and you're talking by proxy about faith, which is, it's kind of a personal, this is beyond water cooler talk.
Yeah.
And we, of course, have a dramatic decrease in church attendance. So we're not having that. And I'm correlating it with, I actually know a lady in town who owns a liquor store where I buy my own wine and whatnot. And she was talking about the national decrease in alcohol sales. And then I heard that from some other people in the health and wellness arena. Well, I correlated that to, so people are really kind of pursuing their health more and not, because alcohol, I think we're kind of past the point of thinking that it by itself is that beneficial. But now the correlation, I think I got some of this maybe through the blue zones, Dan Buettner talking about the blue zones where they do habitually have alcohol as a part, not overindulging, but it's a social construct. Well, just recently, Michael Easter has put out a big show that he did. It was one of his podcasts. I can't remember the guy on it, but the guy was talking about the implications towards the social arena with alcohol. And they're now correlating the decreased alcohol expenditures because we are not getting together socially as much.
Interesting.
It's so interesting. And then I'm thinking, and what happens when you're with a social group and you have a couple of drinks? Usually kind of the inhibitions go down, or you become uninhibited a little bit, and you share the real thing that may be going on at home and whatnot. And just, again, looking at the cascading things. And so I hadn't thought about that till you just shared some of that there, that we're seeing these lack of connection.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so interesting. And I mean, that's even with people that do know each other, they get together. I've done a couple of workshops at birthday parties for friends that have known each other for years. And just giving them some of the prompts that dig a little bit deeper into the formative stories that have made someone who they are, as opposed to the stories they're used to telling to get a laugh. So like, I'll have people talk to each other about the stuffed animal that they had as a kid. What was its name? Where did it come from? When did you reach for it? Where is it now? All of that stuff. The questions get a little bit more vulnerable as time goes on. I'll ask them to share an embarrassing memory or a challenge they overcame. But that arc of getting vulnerable and sharing some of the pieces of themselves that they'd forgotten about often, or just were really important to who they'd grown into but didn't think about it. All of a sudden, people are looking at each other differently. They're walking away with insights. There's so much about the people around us that we don't know, because we all curate what we share to some degree. And any of us that have tried to ask our parents about, how did you meet, and who did you date before that? And at some point, my younger brother, I was telling him that our father had been married before our mother. He said, no, he hasn't. I haven't heard it. I was like, yeah. Like, these stories just never came out because they weren't part of the curated world that our parents voluntarily shared with us. And being able to ask these questions of each other, of our kids, with our siblings, all of these things, when they start coming out, they're surprising. Asking my kids about what they really think or feel in the right way, it's very different than what I assumed often. The things that I thought they would remember is not what they remember. The things that they do remember are things that I wish they would forget. There's all of that. But we all get so caught up in the rhythms of our life and the momentum of it that we forget. There's this nice phrase that I like, that too often the urgent eclipses the important. And so remembering what's important as the urgent comes crushing day to day in, I think is a nice way of resetting. If we can give ourselves enough time with the people that we care about to really go a little bit deeper. There's a great bit of work that a psychologist, Arthur Aronson, did, that the New York Times did a piece on, called The 36 Questions That Lead to Intimacy. And he basically sort of he's like, how quickly can two people feel deeply connected? And there were certain buckets that you had to tick about what you shared, how vulnerable you got, your successes, a little humble brag, you had to feel all these things. And doing those questions with the people that you think you know really well is a beautiful experience, much less somebody that you don't really know very well.
Ben, if you haven't seen it, we just had, actually, I don't even know if it's published yet, but I talked with Topaz Adizes. I don't know if you know that name. His name's Topaz Adizes. He has this, if you go to, and my listeners, sorry if we haven't published a show yet. I actually don't know. On YouTube, if you type in the Skin Deep into there, he's got almost 1 million followers, and it started just with couples, but now it's any two people who are in or desire an intimate relationship. It could be a parent child. It could be two best friends. It could be whatever. They sit them down and give them, as Topaz says, these well-constructed questions, kind of along the line what you're talking about, that open the doors. And so you see people that just tears immediately, or
It's amazing how quickly and often just how little is needed. I did an activity once between two groups through the mail. And I gave them those prompts that I just described, the stuffed animal that you had as a kid, vulnerable, all these, a couple of others. And they had postcards. And I asked them to answer these questions in two ways, with words and with images. And I gave them, crayons and stuff, and they would draw it out. They'd write out their story, and they'd mail it to their partner, and they would cross in the mail, and then they'd do the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And after 5 weeks, I brought them back together for a face-to-face meeting finally on Zoom. And this was in the early stages of COVID. So everybody was sort of isolated. And it was only when the screen came on that they realized that half the group were 80-year-olds that had been isolated in sort of, their retirement homes, and the other group were 8-year-olds from a middle school that had bad shutdown, and they were concerned about the kids' social standing. And I paired them all up. And some of them had figured it out early because the 80-year-olds were wondering why one of their peers might be so into Taylor Swift, and the 8-year-olds were wondering why the most meaningful moment of one of their peers might be the birth of their grandchild. But a lot of them hadn't. They had just connected, and they'd connected with each other based on character rather than characteristics. They didn't know the gender, the age, the race. They knew the political persuasion. They knew nothing about the other person except these stories about who they were and who they'd been. And it was the most amazing thing because the kids and the adults, but they asked, could they continue this relationship? Could they keep writing to each other? 8-year-old kids who want to keep writing a letter? I mean, that was pretty stunning. And very telling, just because they had such a good time connecting to each other and realizing how much either that they had in common or that they were learning about something very different, and they really enjoyed that piece of it. But it was sort of amazing to see.
In your line was connecting on character, not characteristics, right?
Yeah, that was the premise behind what we designed, to try to block out anything that might bias you in how you would tell your story. We do a version of it now online where we just have everybody turn off their cameras, change their name. We put them into a breakout room, and we have them type these so that there's no sound. And then we have a couple of activities or actions, creative actions around that as well, to sort of, so that it's generative and they feel seen and connected. But this idea of just assuming that the person on the other side is someone like you, that they want to hear your story, they're glad to share theirs with you. And then seeing that the last two are true. They wanted to hear your story and they're glad to share theirs with you, but they're not like you. That's an amazing moment when that sort of comes to, and when we do this digital one, we often get people saying, how did you know to pair us up? We were both adopted, or I grew up in her city and she grew up in mine. How did you know? I'm like, this is completely random. You could have had that connection with everybody else in this experience. You just haven't yet because you haven't answered these questions with each other. Go forth and talk and find what you have in common. Find what you have, what's the thing you have most in common? What's the thing you have least in common? These are equally interesting things.
I find myself thinking about, again, I've had places of work, a business, and we had some employees, but for me, it's always small business. But to think of, I remember reading in your book that people with the often negative concept around team building, like, I don't want to team build, I want to go home and be with my family. But to thinking what a benefit, especially in today's world where you go home and people aren't connected, they're on their devices and they're not connecting, that if you are in a place of work and have the opportunity for this, what a great opportunity for social engagement to know other people and connect, because you're probably not getting it like the survey said, that we're not getting together socially and having drinks at the bar or wherever. We're not going to church. We're not going to wherever people, the town square, whatever people used to meet. We're not doing it. So work. Yeah. My thought, I'm thinking, you mentioned if you've got a workplace that's not doing this, that to experiment, you said that early on, to experiment, maybe do that. And you said, or if it's really bad, you may need to question whether you're there. And my thought is, shameless plug, just go buy a case of Ben's book, the one hanging over my shoulder here, and just place them around here. Kind of like putting books in a library, just go place them in the kitchen area, place them in the foyer, place them around, because what a great opportunity.
Well, thank you for the plug. I appreciate that. But I do think, as I said, if you're it's the quote that's on the bumper sticker everywhere that, be the change you want to see in the world. If what you want is a place that's more connected, it starts by taking a risk. It starts by leading that charge a little bit and taking those risks, and then coping with the consequences, either celebrating the wins or licking your wounds and deciding how you're going to go forward. But I have seen the difference that it makes when you can work with people that know you, see you, appreciate you. One of my favorite clients is a group of accountants from, they're based in Los Angeles. They do back end stuff for the studios, spreadsheets, not known, again, not a famously party crowd. And yet this entire group, 30, 40 of them, are the happiest, most jubilant. They're friendly and laughing, and they're having a great time together because their leadership knows how important that is. And so they block off time every week, every month, to see these people for who they are, to listen to each other, to connect. And the work itself is all the better because these people are really invested in each other. They care if someone else is struggling and not getting stuff done, and they want to help. But yeah, to your point, most team building is awful. I've always, if I'm being completely blunt, have always loathed team building. I was the guy that, I would run for the hills rather than do another role-playing skit. I am a shy introvert. But it was being in a place where all of those qualities could come out and flourish that I realized the value of really finding a way through this. And so, the things that I've designed in the safe danger moment is my compromise. It's what I would have needed in those moments. Like, okay, this is a reasonable ask with a very fast reward that allows me, it's like a sample plate. Like I can taste this, decide, oh yeah, I want more of this. I'm going to keep doing this. Or connection is not for me. I hate people. Be gone. And then great. You know that about yourself. But yeah, most team building it optimizes for fun, which is lovely, except I'd rather have fun with my family or the friends that I really choose as opposed to my work people. It's not enough on its own if something new isn't built between your people that you're spending at least 40 hours a week surrounded by. I mean, why not make that into a group that you respect and that you're interested in and understand?
Agreed. And I just appreciate your overall message, Ben, just for us to all look at ourselves, how we're protecting ourselves. We could do another hour just on that aspect, and maybe we'll do another one. I am grateful for you bringing this message out, and I'm honored to share it with people. I'll be talking about it in the morning. I texted the cover. I have 2 guys I meet with every Friday. We have coffee and talk about life, talk about these questions. And I gave them a shot of your book. So I'll be talking about it with them.
Thank you for that.
Well, as they look at their own places of work, both of them own businesses, both of them have families, and it's an important topic. So just thank you.
I know we're wrapping up, but I just very quickly.
Yeah.
The night that I was supposed to turn my book in, I've been working on it for about 1.5 years, and I put all this stuff together. I was going through and doing all the last minute check. It was like 20 minutes to midnight. And I put, I am a procrastinator by nature. So I waited until the last minute to do all these things. But as I was about to do it, I had a flash of basically my 13-year-old self that said, you can't turn this in. Just scrap it, throw it away, and tell them you can't do it. Cancel the contract. Don't do it because it's too. There are going to be people out there that don't like it, and it's going to be embarrassing and all this stuff. And it was such a sledgehammer out of my past. I was a kid that would do very creative things in 7th grade, and then get to school and throw them away and take a 0 because I was afraid of being laughed at. I thought I had gotten over that. I thought decades ago I had learned that lesson. And yet this night before I put this book together and shared all these things, it came flooding back. And it was a nice reminder to me of how much I still have to learn from basically myself, and to share it. And a friend of mine I told that story to, and he was like, yeah, it's really, he's a writer too. He said, the way I've approached it is I've stopped trying to prove my critics wrong, and I just try to prove my fans right. And I thought, okay, I can I can hold on to that. I can just put this out there, and if it resonates with people, then it's worthwhile. And if it doesn't, they don't have to keep reading. But it's lovely to hear from someone like you that is so thoughtful, that talks to people all the time about this, that is clearly doing the work to expand yourself and your insights and all of that, and share it with others, that it resonates with you. It means a lot. So thank you for
it is. These are topics that I care about, and I care about imparting them. And I wish I was Oprah and I could reach that many people and tell them to go get your book. I'm not quite Oprah, but I'll do what I can. That line, stop trying to prove your critics wrong, prove your fans right. I have some people I'm going to send that to, just to gift them today. I got some text messages to write, and I'll give you credit for that. Thank you. Thank you for your thoughtfulness, and thank you for overcoming your 13-year-old self so that I have this book and we're talking right now. Ben, I so appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. It's been a real joy.
Thanks for joining us in the discussion. That again is Ben Swire, and the book I was referencing is called Safe Danger, an unexpected method for sparking connection, finding purpose, and inspiring innovation. Till next time, here's to you and me making better meaning in our lives and experiencing the miracle of living.
Yeah.